So Britain has taken direct control of India and they rule it through their viceroy. Now, just like in Africa, just like in other parts of Southeast Asia, there were benefits to British rule in India. It brought stability. Remember, the Mughal Empire began to fall apart when the Hindus rebelled, chaos ensued, and the British brought stability in. They calmed things down. They ended things like Suti, for instance. They uh, ended or wiped out a group of thieves called the Thuggees that worshiped the Hindu goddess you see on the screen there, the Hindu goddess of death. And this group of thieves worshipped her by not just by stealing from travelers, they would then murder the travelers, sacrificing them to Kali. And they eliminated this group of thieves called the Thuggees. In fact, that's where we get the word thug from. And there were people in India who were grateful that there was no more Suti, that there was no more Thuggees, that things had calmed down. They do bring in the modern educational system, but it was not meant for everybody. It was meant for the high caste of India. Remember, India is divided into caste. It was meant for the high caste of India, and they educated the members of the high caste so they could assist them in running their colony. And they did bring in modern infrastructure like roads and bridges, telegraph lines, for instance. But once again, that was just to make trade easier. But because there were steep costs, right? There's destruction of local industry. For thousands of years, Indian women had made cloth by hand. Now the market is flooded with cheap British-made cloth, putting those women out of business. There was famine as well, because like in Africa and Southeast Asia, what develops in India are these large plantations. And if you are a plantation owner, you can make more money growing cotton to sell to the British for their factories back home in Britain. So the plantation stressed the growth of cotton over food, and eventually there was not enough food grown to support the population of India. And then there's just the basic degradation and disrespect that some, not all, but many of the British showed towards the native culture of India, whether it was the Islamic culture or the Hindu culture. For instance, chipping off pieces of the Taj Mahal for souvenirs was common for a while. And remember, that's a tomb, that's a burial place. There was a British official who said that no matter how much an Indian man learned, no matter how brave he was, no matter how much training he had, he would never be as good as a British man. That goes back to that racism and social Darwinism that we've talked about all chapter. But like in Africa and other parts of Southeast Asia, eventually there was a nationalist movement that arose in India, led by the Indian National Congress, the INC. Now, there was a problem within the INC, though. Remember, in India, the two main religions are Hinduism and Islam, and the majority are Hindus. So within the INC, the Muslims felt like they were being ignored, so they eventually split from the INC and formed their own group called the Muslim League, which was great for Britain, right? Britain actively pitted the Muslims and Hindus together, because if the Muslims and Hindus could ever unite together and organize together, they would be a powerful force. So by the Muslim League leaving the INC, it actually hurt the cause of Indian nationalism. And someone who begins to become a leader within the nationalism is a man named Gandhi. Now, he was a highly educated Indian. He was actually a lawyer. He lived a while in South Africa. And remember, in South Africa, they had apartheid, that racist system, and he saw how not just how the Africans were treated there, how Indian immigrants were treated there by the British. And he really grew to resent it. But he realized violence wasn't the answer. They tried that with the Sepoy Mutiny and it didn't work. Also, the older he became, the more devout of a Hindu that he became. So he ended up rejecting violence and believed that the path towards independence lie in civil disobedience, calm, peaceful, creative, nonviolent protest. We'll talk more about Gandhi later. So the nationalist movement, there are different factions. You got the Muslim League, you got the INC, you have some that want to use violence, you have some like Gandhi who believe in non-violence. So the nationalist movement was fractured. So to review, at first India was ruled by the East India Company on behalf of Britain, but then you had the Sepoy Mutiny, so Britain takes direct control and appoints a viceroy. India becomes an agricultural export economy, shipping out cotton in particular, and along with tea, native Indians were used in low ranking civil service jobs. That's why some of them were educated, like Gandhi. And just like we saw in the other two sections, eventually you have the rise of a Western educated middle class like Gandhi, who becomes familiar with Western ideas like social contract, once again, and natural rights, and began to struggle for better economic and political rights. That's what the INC did at first. At first, the INC was not about independence, it was about better treatment. It's once that was denied that the goal shifts to complete independence. But within that INC, the Indian National Congress, the majority were Hindus and the Muslim minority felt ignored, so they left and split and formed their own group called the Muslim League.